Hey, good evening. How's it going? Hope you're having a good Thursday. I don't know about you, but this is actually my favorite day of the week, more than Friday, more than the weekend. There's something I think more enjoyable about anticipating the days coming up than. Anyway, yep. Oh man, if you didn't tell yet, it has been another tiring day. Up till about 5 a.m. again last night. Um, Keeping up on the stream and the writing and just all the other things that go along with it is proving to be kind of like a second job, which is not really surprising, I guess, but gonna have to figure out how to get some sleep at some point. But yeah, gonna kind of take it easy tonight. Gonna do a couple rounds of Recommend Me a Book. If you aren't familiar with that, that's the site that we're looking at there. It's a fun little thing where basically you can either just let it select a sample from any of the books that it has on the site, or you can pick a genre. You can mix genres a little bit, but it'll just pick a random book. It won't show you the title or the author. The whole point is, skip the cover, just dive in, read a little bit of the text, and see what you think. If you like it, when you're done, you can reveal the title and author and add it to your shelf if you really want to. Or if you're not enjoying it, you can just skip it, move on to the next one. A couple other things going on. Let me actually switch gears here just a little bit. So, yeah, the whole, I mentioned before that I've been toying with a lot of different ideas for the stream. And for a long time, I played games here. I've kind of moved that off of here because it's nicer to focus on one kind of content. So this is going to be all books and writing, literature, fiction, any gaming, moving off to a separate stream. And probably not going to do that nearly as much as I used to. Along the way, the other thing that came up is that people seem to really respond to the new title, the Ken Can't Write thing, which is, of course, just meant to be kind of a playful thing. Like, it's true. I have almost daily writer's block of one kind or another, but don't most writers. But it's also just meant to be fun, maybe kind of mildly self-deprecating. But people seem to really like it, so I'm kind of shifting things around. So you may have noticed that the name of the stream, the channel has changed on Twitch. It's now actually called Ken Can't Write. The YouTube channel name has changed. I've updated the display name on Twitter. I'm probably going to be actually changing the account name there too. Kind of shifting things around. And along those lines, the other thing that got going last night, the reason I was actually up till 5 a.m. I don't have the title working yet. Eventually you'll be able to do this. Not Lem. Lem can't write either, probably. KenCan'tWrite.com, and that'll take you to a website. Right now it just does that. DNS takes a while to update, so that's going to take some time. This is the old site. This is what it'll look like if you actually go there. So yeah, you can see this used to be my gaming critique and review blog. It's now switching over somewhere around here to being about writing and fiction and that sort of thing. So, but last night I was getting things cleaned up. Been working on it for the better part of 2 years. Off and on, just kind of fiddling with it here and there. Didn't really know quite what I wanted to do. Hey, Bobatus, how you doing? You want me to call you Bob, or what do you prefer? Online names are so much fun. You never know exactly what to call folks. But anyway, but yeah, so I'm actually looking forward to this. I've got quite a few, both are good. All right, cool. Hey, as long as I'm doing you a basic courtesy, pronouncing it something like the right thing, then that's good. This is actually, you can see this is from a long time ago. It's like 7 years ago when I was trying to get into writing and was having a bad night of writer's block and decided to write about that instead. Anyway, there's going to be all sorts of things here. I'm going to be doing little samples of fiction. The one that I worked on last night is this, kind of documented the idea of the writing prompts that I do on Short Story Saturday, and already getting a little feedback, which is nice. So yeah, go check it out. Right now, apologize, the title is weird. It is PDX, like Portland, Oregon, the airport, PDXKCM.com. That will go away before too long. But I'm also having an argument with the folks at WordPress about whether or not I should be able to transfer a domain or not. They're funny, those people. Yeah. And then this also has in here the link that I personally use to select my pictures for Short Story Saturday. Like each time I pick one of these, I'm going to collect it like 3 times. If we go look at those, you get different... Oh, well, that time we got 2 of the same one. What are the odds? But anyway, you get a different picture for each one. These are... I don't know about you. I'm guessing that these are not all that thrilling for most people. But this, for me, I love lonely vibes. And so this, like an empty building... Put it together with the right song, and yeah, I'll get a short story going. What do we got here? Well, that's more interesting. That's a little bit more dramatic. So anyway, yep. So there's that. So yeah, be looking for more kencan'twrite.com stuff. Basically, we'll get that going. Yes, it's basically Bob and Spartacus, so I'm pronouncing it correctly. Cool. That's funny. This is kind of where my brain went, even though I don't think I was fully conscious of it. Like, my brain knew what to do. It was gluing it together, right? I'm going to skip this song. It's not my favorite. Give that one a thumbs down. Just that weird sampled voice doesn't sound right to me. All right, in the interest of time, just like I said, I did not sleep it in last night, and I want to get some reading done to kind of warm up. We'll read some different prose styles, and then get right into the writing sprints and get going. Speaking of which, so Bobicus, you finished your outline the other day. So how's the rest of it going? Filling in the details, all that going okay? All right. So things are going to look a little funny on here because previously I was, to prevent Duolingo in particular from blinding me, which this is what it looks like again. Like if you can see me right now, like seriously, it's like burning my retinas. But anyway, now that I've switched back, there's a little bit of a problem with some sites where it doesn't like to show things in the right colors. So, bit of a problem. Getting some feedback, your mom didn't like it, some other people did. Isn't that how it usually goes? You're gonna have a mix. I'm curious though, have you shown your mom like a lot of other stuff? Is this kind of a new reaction, or but anyway, yeah, so tonight we're going to try some dystopia. Just to lighten the mood. Alright. And on that note, let's just jump in. Let's start reading. I have no tea. I have a cup of tea sitting in the kitchen, steeping. Is anyone on the couch? Yeah. Would you mind, like, put in one sweetener and... Yeah, actually 2. It's probably been steeping there a while. Taking advantage of my family who are relaxing in the living room here. This is news. She thinks the ending doesn't agree with the book, like that it follows logically but not thematically. Huh, okay. That'll be interesting, yeah. Kind of depends on if you want to present something that'll challenge the reader, or... That's nice she gives you feedback. That's cool. All right. Well, even sans tea, I'm going to go ahead and get started here so I can make the best use of time tonight. What do we have first? I jolted upright in my seat. I remember getting on the airplane and fastening my seatbelt. Thank you. Oh, here, can you... Oh, actually, that's okay. Whoops. Sorry for all the noise here. All right. Clear the throat. And I don't know about you too, but a lot of the time I'll focus on the people who, or the feedback that doesn't, that sees... Depends on the nature of the problem, I guess, but I'm kind of inclined to listen to that feedback more, because a lot of the time it ends up being more thoughtful. Like, it might be that I still disagree, but if someone actually took the time to analyze it enough to realize that they didn't really like it, or they saw something that they felt kind of stood out, so often that's more meaningful, or I found it more meaningful than when people just go, yeah, it was great, and that's all kind of all you get. It's like, thank you. Tell me what you didn't like, and then they're like, nah, I don't want to. All right. I jolted upright in my seat. I remember getting on the airplane and fastening my seatbelt as the flight attendant went over the safety protocol, but I couldn't pinpoint when I started to doze off. We were still on the runway, and everyone else around me had also fallen asleep and remained unconscious. I looked to the next row, and the next row after that, and everyone was limp, fast asleep, with their heads sagging and mouths agape. I was baffled. How did everyone have fallen asleep so quickly? We hadn't even taken off yet. The flight attendants were working their way forward from the back of the plane with their rolling cart. It seemed like they should have been taking drink orders and handing out peanuts, but instead they were removing strange metallic helmets from their cart and placing them on the passengers' heads. IVs were dangling down in each row where oxygen masks should have been, and the flight attendants were inserting these into the arm of each passenger after they secured the helmet. Fear gripped me. My heart raced, and the blood rose in my body until the sound of thumping and gushing water reached my ears. I was beginning to hyperventilate and sweating profusely. My throat was tight, my body tense. I need to get out of here, I thought. I ripped my seatbelt off and stood up, but felt a tearing in my right leg, followed by sharp pain. Looking down at the seat, I realized there had been a needle in the back of my thigh which had protruded from the seat cushion and had injected me with something. That is when the flight attendant in front of the cart noticed me. She seemed startled, turning around suddenly with a jump. "Oh, sir, please take your seat. We're getting ready to take off," she said, as she fumbled in the repurposed beverage cart for something. The other flight attendant behind the cart gasped and covered her mouth, attempting to hide her surprise at seeing me awake. The closer flight attendant started walking towards me cautiously with a needle in her hand. "Stop," I gasped, putting up my hands in defense as she approached. "What's going on?" Okay, short sample that, which is okay. Sometimes that's all it takes. So in this case, I don't know about you, but the situation to me is at least moderately interesting. So they're on a plane. So I know the genre ahead of time. I presume genre anyways. Dystopia. We have an airplane. We have, the flight's been repurposed for something potentially nefarious. Not necessarily. We don't know exactly what's going on. If I have any problems with it, it's that the prose is it's a little bit cliche to my ears. And then there's some things where I think they're rushing a little bit. And I kind of wonder if this isn't more a consequence of, basically, I wonder if I might not be in the minority in thinking that. Because I think there's a lot of people who get the advice, action, 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 action dialogue, action dialogue, action dialogue. And it's like, I personally don't like that. I would rather, with this sort of scene, that we feel a couple things as we go along. So, what do we have here? We have all the pre-flight stuff. Like, make the pre-flight thing real. Let me smell that weird kind of the air that they're pumping into the corridors. You walk down the gangplank onto the plane, and it smells sort of like fuel and oil and outside and metal, and it's not really a comforting thing, but it does smell like travel. Let me feel getting on the plane, and then let's see. Jolted upright, remember getting on the plane, fastening my seatbelt, but I couldn't pinpoint when I started to doze off. Okay, so they didn't get the full dose of whatever. How could everyone fall asleep so quickly? We hadn't even taken off yet. Even that little thing, like look out the window, maybe see the wing or the runway. give me a sense of how they felt that they hadn't taken off yet. Flight attendants were working their way forward at the back of the plane with a rolling cart. See, that would be immediately at odds with the idea that they hadn't taken off yet, which they kind of point out. It seemed like they should have been taking drink orders and handing out peanuts. Not yet. Not typically on flights, anyway. Not the ones I've been on. That happens when you're in the air and things have settled down a little bit. And then this, too, metallic helmets. There's so much that's described before we see this reaction. And again, let me be really clear here too. I'm unpublished. I'm not criticizing this so much as a writer as what I would hope to see as a reader. I don't know. That feels important to point out. I guess whenever I'm being negative, I want to make sure like these are my thoughts. Hopefully, there's they're infused with reason. There's going to be some preference in there, but I'm not saying it to be mean or to say, "Oh, you just did it wrong." I see potential in this, and I personally would have liked to have seen it realized it a little bit different way. So we jump in without any prep, and then we have lots and lots of facts without reaction. The reaction itself is, again, a little cliche. Fear gripped me. My heart raced, and the blood rose in my body until the sound of thumping and gushing water reached my ears. I was beginning to hyperventilate. I began to hyperventilate. So there's a little bit of just wordsmithing that probably needs to be done. Maybe sweating profusely. My throat was tight, my body tense. Need to get out of here, I thought. I ripped my seatbelt off and stood up, but felt a tearing in my right leg followed by sharp pain. What is the difference between a tearing in my right leg followed by sharp pain? Like, oh, my leg ripped. Ouch! Like it's a separate thing. Anyway, so yeah, it just feels a little clumsy. So again, back to what I said right at the very beginning. Overall, in terms of the setup, the what's going on and what might be happening, yeah, that I'm kind of with it. I get it. This particular telling, not as much. So let's go ahead and see who it is. And let's embarrass me by revealing who the well-known, very popular, successful author is who I'm sitting here criticizing. Let's see. The Lives Inside Your Head. Flight Grounded by Joe Jarvis. What is that then? That's a totally different book. Okay, so we talked about this the other night. There was someone on the channel who, YS Books in particular, who was doing some homework on the site, more than I've done. They were doing the homework I should have done before I really started this. Let me just say that. But anyway, and they were pointing out kind of the way the system worked, and I've seen some Reddit posts since about people saying like, oh yeah, it basically is run by one guy, and it's not his full-time job. So he kind of gets around to updating things now and then. It's buggy. Like it's got content issues. So if we want to find this, we gotta search for this. So let's go try that. So here we have Amazon.com. Don't know if that's going to show anything. What is that? Oh, who wants to know? I was buying some like epoxy. So, yeah. I'm going to sign out here. People don't need to see this. Hello, sign in. Well, if I'm. Oh, I'm not signed in. I don't know what that's doing there. All right, let's get rid of that. JB, well, yeah. Anyway, Flight Grounded, paperback by Joe Jarvis, June 7th, 2016. Who's a publisher? Old Future Media. Let's see what else they've done. Balloons. Let's see. There we go. So it's an indie thing. That's kind of what I was getting to. which isn't, it's not bad. It's just this maybe is one of those things where I don't know if it was self-published or they're just starting up. Probably needs a couple more passes of editing, maybe a little bit. 10 ratings, 4 stars. Let's see what the reviews look like. Interesting premise. Book sets off to an exciting start as Jake survives an airplane explosion and then is blamed as a perpetrator. So, okay. Not necessarily what I would call dystopian, but alright. More like some kind of action thriller setup. Alright, so that's a no. I'm just going to pass on that one. Okay. Let's see. Okay, I don't recognize this. We'll go ahead and get going. Let's see. I looked out from the window of my rented Nottingham apartment and surveyed the skyline of frosty rooftops. I could see hundreds of ransacked, scorched, and dilapidated buildings. It was early in the morning, and the streets below were empty. I watched a solitary crow swoop down to the frozen ground and decisively peck at the remains of a dead rat. A minute later, it lifted off into the leaden sky, turning with the direction of the wind, cawing loudly as it went. The crow seemed to know exactly what it was doing, unlike most people in the city who, like me, were probably hiding from the freezing weather, taking shelter wherever they could find it, wondering where their next meal might come from. It is a scary world that I live in, but I am determined to survive. As I gazed at the blackened shell of a burned-out building across the road, I recollected that years ago, rampaging mobs of desperate people trashed the city and left it in flames, leaving behind the chaos of vandalized buildings and infrastructure. Similar occurrences repeated themselves across the country. Many other towns and cities had been affected, some worse than others. It's the result of disunity, I sadly reflected as I rested my elbows on the windowsill. People had been unable to function together as a whole. A major worldwide economic depression exacerbated the situation, the combination of which caused paper money in this country to become worthless. Electronic money vanished into thin air as if it never existed. The national debt was insurmountable. It was never going to be repaid because the country was bankrupt. Unemployment rose uncontrollably with government services and the benefit system impossible to maintain. Consequently, the structure of local authorities was disbanded, along with the emergency services, armed forces, and most of Britain's greatest institutions. Many of the nation's schools, colleges, universities, hospitals, and banks closed their doors. Vital utility companies, heavy industries, and transport operators were forced out of business. Buses and trains stopped running, and commercial planes stopped flying because they were not economically viable to continue. Prisons were emptied, and crime became rife. Millions of people were forced out onto the streets to fend for themselves. Wages became irrelevant, and even those who managed to find work became desperately poor because of low pay and staggeringly high inflation. The lucky ones, including some members of the royal family, had apparently fled to parts of the world that were more affluent. No one seemed to be able to say where the heir to the throne or monarch had gone. Life became so difficult and dangerous that people took security measures into their own hands. Vigilante groups were set up in response to the troubles. Former army personnel and police officers joined whichever group they thought would become the most influential. The more sophisticated organizations became militia armies that grew in power and influence. The militias took control of wider areas of the country by mounting a series of coups and land grabs. New borders formed as Britain became a complex array of warring independent nations. Nottingham was absorbed into a new country that adopted the medieval name of Mercia, which covers a large swath of Middle England. A separate region of central England became an independent enclave called Byzantium, which mostly attracted people who were not native to the islands. Pardon me. And were trapped here because there was nowhere else they could go that felt safe. Understandably, they gathered together for their own protection. Another enclave was purported to have formed in the east of the country called Lethrib. Again, not something I would choose to put on my bookshelf, just based on what we've seen. The prose read better, even just the this first paragraph. So I looked out from our window of my rented Nottingham apartment and surveyed the rented. So they're still renting. There's still money. And surveyed the skyline of frosty rooftops. I could see hundreds of ransacked, scorched, and dilapidated buildings. It was early in the morning, and the streets below were empty. I watched a solitary crow swoop down to the frozen ground and decisively pecked at the remains of a dead rat. A minute later, it lifted off into the leaden sky, turning with the direction of the wind, calling loudly as it went. That's a nice paragraph. Reads really, really well. That kind of got my attention, kept me going. And it's important to note, it didn't get my attention by going, big drama, weird, exciting thing. It's just, okay, there's subtle hints here. If I, as the reader, am paying attention, then there are scorched and dilapidated buildings, right? I know where it is. I don't know what else is going on, but that's actually enough. And the crow's sort of a good image of like some kind of portent of maybe something bad has happened, right? So I like that. Beyond there, I don't think it does anything that I find all that spectacular, unfortunately. In fact, I think it goes into what I would personally classify as a little bit of an info dump. Because we start off, the way we experience the world in this paragraph, to me, really works. Because again, emotionally, in terms of what a really good book does, is that it will draw the feelings that are going on in the text out of you. Not by telling you what to feel, but by putting things in front of you that conjure those feelings, right? And this starts to do that. The crow seemed to know exactly what it was doing, unlike most people in the city who, like me, were probably hiding from the freezing weather. Okay, so there's some problem with, exposure to elements, maybe taking shelter wherever they could find it. Yep, something went on. Wondering where the next meal might come from. It is a scary world that I live in, but I'm determined to survive. That's the first thing that kind of stood out to me as it's just a little too plain. I don't know. It struck me as a little clumsy. Blackened shell of a burned out building, desperate mobs of people. So here begins what happened, and we aren't really invested yet. I don't think we need to know all this, personally. So this draws me in. This then turns into a hope you care by now, because we're going to tell you everything that happened for the last however long. I'm just not able to really get into it. The story it tells isn't all that unique. And let's be clear, originality is highly overrated. So it's not that it's not unique, it's just not distinctive either. It doesn't do anything to really grab you and go, here's the thing we didn't expect, or, here's where it began. Instead of telling you all the stuff that happened, let me set something in front of you that makes me go, wait a minute, what is that? That way I kind of chase after it mentally, and the next paragraphs hopefully kind of lead me through that. So yeah, this doesn't quite do that. So let's go ahead and see who it is. The Covenant Bowl. That's an interesting cover by P.D. Stanton. Rather than show that here, I'm actually going to do that a little offline. I'll find things that I can show in that window then. Paperback, published in 2020. 3 ratings. Publisher is Olympia Publishers. I don't see a lot else by this particular author, so might be their first. Leaving the security of his uncle's olive farm in Abruzzo. Make sure I'm looking at the right one. Yeah. Samuel Fretwell returns to war-ravaged Mercia after 5 years away in desperate search for news of his displaced family. The economic troubles of the late 21st century, however, have taken a much more severe toll on the divided island in his absence. He finds a disintegrated, impoverished nation, socially fragmented and morally bankrupt. Okay. Yeah, it isn't not quite my thing. So, on to the next one again. This will be the last dystopia that we do, and then I'll switch to some other genre. Stan the Bacteria Man appeared in the Oval Office on a gloomy Tuesday morning. Stan the Bacteria Man had a very bacteria plan, that man. Do you know about bullet points? I've come to understand bullet points, and I find them quite useful. Here, have some now. The air outside was 98 degrees Fahrenheit and 57% humidity, with a heavily overcast cloud cap under a dome of exceedingly stagnant high pressure, which was very important but would not be so for much longer. You know how weather is. I enjoy sharing that with you. The air inside was 69 degrees Fahrenheit and 25% humidity because the chief of staff liked to giggle and wink at his assistants and use his mouth hole to say, "Hey, check the thermostat for me." Also because the building held a variety of priceless national treasures that would begin to mold above 45% humidity. Although the staff of the National Archive responsible for protecting those treasures from horny executive officers were not aware that fully 34% of pieces in the collection were already quite heavily infiltrated with a variety of thriving microflora who did not know how to read thermostats. The carpet on the floor was a blend of half-phase rayonite wool, registered trademark, twisted with nylon, that is also a registered trademark, I think, in the shade of stalwart declarations, and muted and white creamy pastel gold, which caught the light just so and was a favorite of the first family because the ancestral stock portfolio held a notably large position in Dow, which had formulated the polymer, which was strange because both the Chief of Staff and the Chief of Staff of the First Lady's office, which is strange because both the Chief of Staff and the Chief of Staff of the First Lady's office, meanwhile, went out of their way to publicly extol the virtues of this donated one-of-a-kind carpet, featuring uniquely Appalachian free-range jumbuck wool raised in the rural heartland by an Australian sheep rancher named Jim Bean, whose teeth glitters like wet tiles in the publicity photos when he holds Independence Day campaign tithing barbecues on his adjacent 776-acre soy farm in Tennessee with the smoking and grill pits arranged on two of the estate's 4 helidrome pads and the fireworks launch zone set atop once wetlands-filled sand trucked up from the new Gulf Coast, and who donates quite heavily to the terrorist wing of the Cracker Barrel each financial quarter and instructs his accountants to double the figure and enter that amount into QuickBooks Super Platinum, registered trademark, as a community development charity, which is tax deductible at a 200% rate with the proper receipts because the non-terrorist wing of the Cracker Barrel is very diligent about that sort of thing in his registered state of fiduciary residence. I imagine you've heard all that before, but I was eager to remind you because some of it I was only just able to learn myself. Forgive me. The occasion was a mandatory informal session of putting ethanol into mouth holes following a cabinet meeting, and since it was the current know-nothing fashion, the 8 men comprising the cabinet were engaged in a series of escalating retellings of combat drone footage they'd seen in person during the idle afternoons and sweaty late-night sessions at the Situation Room. Oh, thank goodness. It was the Secretary of Education's turn, who had a learned man's way with words and was wittily using his mouth hole to describe the precise cowardly characteristics of the art taken by a fleeting bread merchant's dismembered and airborne leg following a 5-mile, 0.75-inch sniping effort in the coalition zone last October, eliciting an explosion of laughter in the room, which is why Stan the Bacteria Man tripped while standing up from behind the long couch, upholstered in rayonite silk, registered trademark, in the shade Plains of Fortitude, of muted and white creamy pastel gold. I'm just revealing it. Stan, the Bacteria Man, by Stephen M.A. So you might be able to tell my reaction to this one. Not a fan. Maybe some people really like this. 5 ratings, 3.7 on Amazon. I mean, don't get me wrong. Ratings are kind of I don't buy into them a lot. I don't use them to recommend books to myself, but it's more of I don't know, what are other people doing? M.A.'s brisk story is endlessly amusing. He employs repetition to great effect. Several topical issues like police brutality and immigration are fodder for well-executed satire. I just don't... Nope. I think it's trying very, very, very hard to be clever. And I just don't see it. And the publisher is him. So, yeah. Is there anything in particular to say about it? Basically, this falls into that you better hope people like your cleverness, because if they don't, they're not even going to take the time to strike a match to burn it. The repeated phrase mouthhole, like, come on. Yeah. I feel like it's trying to emulate some authors who do similar sort of jabby things with prose, but it's just not as skilled in doing that, and so it just absolutely falls flat. All right, I tell you what, since I've been reading dystopia, let me get another example of dystopia to read. As, like I said, when I have typically done a bunch of these, and then I'll read one personally selected sample to kind of, like, okay, well, here's something that I think fits well into this. I have what I think is a pretty good example of dystopian writing. Take a minute to pull it up here, apparently. Last time we read Lanny, which is not really dystopian, but it's an interesting read. Actually, Lanny's really good. So I'm gonna do that one again, only because, not the whole thing that I read last time. And there is some slightly, potentially offensive language in this, so be warned. But in terms of people who adopt a very different sort of punchy style of writing, this, I think, is a kind of example where this author knows how to do it really well. So dead Papa Toothwort wakes from his standing nap, an acre wide, and scrapes off dream dregs of bitumen glistening thick with liquid globs of litter. He lies down to hear hymns of the earth. There are none, so he hums. Then he shrinks, cuts himself a mouth with a rusted ring pole, and sucks up a wet skin of acid-rich mulch and fruity detrivores. He splits and wobbles, divides and reassembles, coughs up a plastic pot and a petrified condom, briefly pauses as a smashed fiberglass bath, stumbles and rips off the mask, feels his face and finds it made of long-buried tannic acid bottles, Victorian rubbish. Tetchy Papa Toothwort should never sleep in the afternoon. He doesn't know who he is. So that's all I'm going to read there. It's just, to me, it's an example of something that when you read it, it obviously reads very differently than typical, he went to the post office and mailed a letter. And, it's a very overt kind of a style. But it's fun to read. It is rich and descriptive language and impact. And, yeah. Well, I wish the author well. I can respect what they're trying to do. Be interesting to see where it goes from there. All right. I just realized you didn't share the screen for that one, so oh well. Let's see. Should have yeah, there we go. I actually have a physical copy of this one, but I'm just going to read the Kindle version here. And I will do that in a moment. Apparently I've got to switch some things up real quick. Be with you in just a sec. Oops. There we go. Okay. When he woke in the woods, in the dark, in the cold of the night, he'd reach out to touch the child sleeping beside him. Nights dark beyond darkness, and the days more gray each one than what had gone before, like the onset of some cold glaucoma dimming away the world. His hand rose and fell softly with each precious breath. He pushed away the plastic tarpaulin and raised himself in the stinking robes and blankets and looked toward the east for any light, but there was none. In the dream from which he had wakened, he had wandered in a cave where the child led him by the hand, their light playing over the wet flowstone walls like pilgrims in a fable swallowed up and lost among the inward parts of some granitic beast. Deep stone flues where the water dripped and sang, tolling in the silence the minutes of the earth and the hours and the days of it and the years without cease, until they stood in a great stone room where lay a black and ancient lake. And on the far shore a creature that raised its dripping mouth from the rimstone pool and stared into the light with eyes dead white and sightless as the eggs of spiders. It swung its head low over the water as if to take the scent of what it could not see. Crouching there pale and naked and translucent, its alabaster bones cast up in shadow on the rocks behind it, its bowels, its beating heart, the brain that pulsed in a dull glass bell. It swung its head from side to side. Hello. There we go. From side to side, gave a low moan. Pardon me for a moment. Gave out a low moan and turned and lurched away and loped soundlessly into the dark. With the first gray light, he rose and left the boy sleeping and walked out to the road and squatted and studied the country to the south. Barren, silent, godless. He thought the month was October, but he wasn't sure. He hadn't kept a calendar for years. They were moving south. There'd be no surviving another winter here. When it was light enough to use the binoculars, he glassed the valley below. Everything paling away into the murk, the soft ash blowing in loose swirls over the blacktop. He studied what he could see. The segments of road down there among the dead trees, looking for anything of color, any movement, any trace of standing smoke. He lowered the glasses and pulled down the cotton mask from his face and wiped his nose on the back of his wrist, and then glassed the country again. Then he just sat there, holding the binoculars and watching the ashen daylight congeal over the land. He knew only that the child was his warrant. He said, "If he is not the word of God, God never spoke." Anyone know that one? Pretty well-known book. This is The Road by Cormac McCarthy. This is not an easy read. It's very easy to read mechanically in terms of the language. I don't know if you know what you thought about the prose, but to me it reads very well. Even like with this first sentence that kind of it doesn't run on like a run-on sentence, but it's an interesting kind of this and this and this and this. But even that plodding rhythm says something about what's going on. Every aspect of the language does work in the telling, right? It's not just the words. It's not just the rhythm or the tone of the language that's chosen. Every bit of the language does work on multiple levels. When he woke in the woods, in the dark, and the cold of the night, he'd reach out to touch the child sleeping beside him. Definitely recommended. Like I said, not an easy read. By the time you get towards the end, this is not a feel-good book. It's beautiful. It is so well written. It is interesting along the way. This one actually, in contrast to the one that took place in Nottingham, where they are so very eager to tell you all the things that happen, all these things that, came along. Consider this in contrast. We don't know anything. And let me tell you, we learned some things along the way in the story, but there's a lot of stuff we never learn, and you just have to kind of reason about based on what you see and what goes on in the story. And personally, I love that. Like, it feels so much more real. There's so much more of it that we experience in the small things, so that when we see something happen kind of on a larger scale in the world, we already have a really rich emotional context, and it becomes that much more meaningful. And this was one of the first places I remember reading and then rereading and then rereading. There's so many beautiful excerpts in this book. Even this one that, the dream sequence, which just, let's take a moment to pause here and acknowledge the fact that, this advice that you hear, which is good advice for other reasons, to say, like, don't start your book with your character looking in the mirror or waking up or in a dream, because it'll just get instantly tossed. It'll get circular filed. Established authors have a license to do that. They're not in a position where they have to prove themselves. And so the problem with that kind of writing isn't the idea itself. You can absolutely start 1,000,001 stories in a dream or looking in a mirror or that kind of thing. It's just you better be a really good storyteller if you're going to do that. And because of the volume of things that publishers and editors and everyone have to read, if you do that as an unknown author, you're putting your work at risk. You may not like it, but that's just the way things go, right? But anyway, so here we go. So we start off, he wakes up, we hear about his dream. But there's some language in here that I remember, like I said, reading and rereading to ask myself, wait, how did that do what it did? Let's see. And on the far shore, a creature that raised its dripping mouth from the rimstone pool and stared into the light with eyes dead white and sightless as the eggs of spiders. It's a weird comparison, right? Sightless as spiders' eggs. I don't know what you picture when you hear that phrase, but when I first heard it, what I saw was almost like a cluster of eyes with no pupil or anything, just this kind of a soft, webby white color, like this thing that lives in the dark and is blind from living in the dark. And so it has eyes, but they're not functional. I don't know, it painted such a clear picture. And so it did this through this weird, there's got to be a name for this particular mode, this particular sort of figurative language, but to me, it's not quite an analogy or a metaphor or any of the things we usually hear about. It is, I think there is a name for this, but I cannot remember what it is. But anyway, sightless as the eggs of spiders. So this whole thing tells us that it was blind, but it does so in a descriptive way that also tells us indirectly something about how it looks. It doesn't tell us directly what's going on, but it's really strong, informationally rich, and conjures an image right away. For what it's worth too, no spoilers, but if you read this, pay attention to this dream and then see what you think of it through the rest of the book. I think you can read the whole thing, forget about this dream that he has, and get by. You're not going to miss anything essential in the book. But this is here for a reason. It isn't really referenced anywhere else, but I think it has a pretty telling meaning if you go back and read again and see this. So that's one of the other things that's really enjoyable about this book, in this mode of telling, where instead of being here's all the detailed, I'm going to give you sort of a journalistic history of the thing, when we experience it through the people and then we see the whole story and we kind of see what happens and we've learned more about what's going on in the world, and then we go back and read again, it has a lot of rereadability, both because of the beautiful language, but also because we're going to see things differently on the second pass. We're going to, when you go back after reading the whole thing and you look at this passage and if you're thinking about it, you might go, oh, wait a minute. Hold on. This isn't just some sort of Like I'm going to try to creep out the audience by telling them about this creepy creature in my dream that lives in this cave and all that, that's kind of transparent looking. Anyway. So yeah, obviously I'm a fan. Cormac McCarthy. This is the only complete work of his I've read. I've read a lot of other samples and that kind of thing just to kind of pick up his style. I read slowly, so I would love to read more of his complete works. Blood Meridian. Blood Meridian is probably one of the next ones, really. Which a lot of what else he writes is actually sort of like contemporary Western. No Country for Old Men, which, if you didn't know, that film was actually based on one of his novels. And that film, the very last scene with Tommy Lee Jones, actually is another really good example of his writing, where he will tell you something and he'll tell you really simply, but when you look at the full context of the story, you realize how rich in additional meaning that passage really is. So, multi-dimensional writing, which all really, really good writing is that. It's doing multiple things on multiple levels to manipulate us in ways that we aren't even cognizant of as we read it. Okay. There's my little fan spiel for The Road. Let me switch back to recommend me a book. There we go. All right, let's go pick a different genre. Dystopia. We have to look in this way. Adventure, all art, biography, business. No. Fantasy. Not doing fantasy. Horror. We did horror the other day. Inspirational, literary. Oh, literary. Well, I talked about it a lot. Let's try it. Okay. I don't recognize this one. Pardon me while I sit up here. Okay. The madness of an autumn prairie cold front coming through, you could feel it. Something terrible was going to happen. The sun low in the sky, a minor light, a cooling star, dust after dust of disorder. Trees restless, temperatures falling, the whole northern region of things coming to an end. No children in the yards here. Shadows lengthened on the yellowing zoysia? Red oaks and pin oaks and swamp white oaks rained acorns on houses with no mortgage. Storm windows shuddered in the empty bedrooms, and the drone and hiccup of a clothes dryer, the nasal contention of a leaf blower, the ripening of local apples in a paper bag, the smell of the gasoline which Alfred Lambert had cleaned the paint... Smell of the gasoline with which Alfred Lambert had cleaned the paintbrush from his morning painting of the wicker love seat. 3 p.m. was a time of danger in these gerontocratic suburbs of St. Jude. Alfred had awakened in the great blue chair in which he'd been sleeping since lunch. He'd had his nap, and there would be no local news until 5 o'clock. 2 empty hours were a sinus in which infections bred. He struggled to his feet and stood by the ping-pong table, listening in vain for Enid. Ringing throughout the house was an alarm bell that no one but Alfred and Enid could hear directly. It was the alarm bell of anxiety. It was like one of those big cast-iron dishes with an electric clapper that sends school children into the street in fire drills. By now it had been ringing for so many hours that the Lamberts no longer heard the message of bell ringing, but as with any sound that continues for so long that you have the leisure to learn its component sounds, as with any word you stare at until it resolves itself into a string of dead letters, instead heard a clapper rapidly striking a metallic resonator. Not a pure tone, but a granular sequence of percussions with a keenly overlaying of overtones. ringing for so many days that it simply blended into the background except at certain early morning hours when one or the other of them awoke in a sweat and realized that a bell had been ringing in their heads for as long as they could remember, ringing for so many months that the sound had given way to a kind of meta-sound whose rise and fall was not the beating of compression waves, but the much, much slower waxing and waning of their consciousness of the sound, which consciousness was particularly acute when the weather itself was in an anxious mood. Then Enid and Alfred, she on her knees in the dining room opening drawers, he in the basement surveying the disastrous ping-pong table, each felt near to exploding with anxiety. The anxiety of coupons in a drawer containing candles in designer autumn colors. The coupons were bundled in a rubber band, and Enid was realizing that their expiration dates, often jauntily circled in red by the manufacturer, lay months and even years in the past. That these 100-odd coupons, whose total face value exceeded $60, potentially $120 at the Chiltsville supermarket that doubled coupons, had all gone bad. Tylex 60 cents off, Excedrin PM $1 off. The dates were not even close. The dates were historical. The alarm bell had been ringing for years. I'm really curious to know what other people think of this. Personally, I really liked it. This is kind of what I'm going for and what I'm doing, so I'm trying to borrow some of the stylistic and mechanical sort of aspects of this kind of writing. I mean, different still in tone and style than this exactly, but I like what it's doing, where it goes deep on small things. And in so doing, if you're a willing participant, if you're a willing audience, like it conjures a certain sense of things, even like just the description of the bundled coupons, all of which have expired. I don't know. It says it comes with a particular sort of emotional content. It comes with a feeling. There isn't a lot of like what's going on in here yet, but that's okay. Personally, I can put up with this because I'm enjoying the prose. I'm enjoying the picture and the sort of sensory picture and images that it's constructing. So yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, like I was saying, personally, I'd like to do this sort of thing, but also allow in, which other authors do, also allow in things like I'm trying to think of a good example of this. Again, magical realism, 100 Years of Solitude, where, the blood goes kind of crawling up the street in search of the dead man's mother. Odd example, but there you go. So anyway, yeah, I like this. I would continue reading if I had picked this up. So what are we looking at? The Corrections by Jonathan Franzen. Let me just look that up, see what we can learn about it. Whoops, wrong. Oh no, actually that works. Okay. It's a 2001 novel by American author Jonathan Franzen. It revolves around the troubles of an elderly Midwestern couple and their 3 adult children tracing their lives from the mid-20th century to one last Christmas together near the turn of the millennium. It was awarded the National Book Award in 2001 and the James Tate Black Memorial Prize in 2002. It was published to wide acclaim from literary critics for its characterization and prose, not surprising to me. While the novel's release preceded the September 11th terrorist attacks by 10 days, wow, many have interpreted the Corrections as having prescient insight into the major concerns and general mood of post-9/11 American life, and it's been listed in multiple publications as one of the greatest novels of the 21st century. Yeah, cool, all right. I have not heard of it. I've never heard of this. I do not recognize the author's name. It is going on my shelf. Cool beans. All right, next. Let's see. I don't think I've read this one. Let's go ahead. The stranger came early in February, one wintry day through a biting wind and a driving snow, the last snowfall of the year, over the down, walking from Bramblehurst railway station and carrying a little black portmanteau in his thickly gloved hand. He was wrapped up from head to foot, and the brim of his soft felt hat hid every inch of his face, but the shiny tip of his nose. The snow had piled itself against his shoulders and chest and added a white crest to the burden he carried. He staggered into the coach and horses, more dead than alive, and flung his portmanteau down. "A fire!" he cried. "In the name of human charity, a room and a fire!" He stamped and shook the snow from off himself in the bar, and followed Mrs. Hall into her guest parlor to strike his bargain, and with that much introduction and this and a couple of sovereigns flung upon the table, he took up his quarters in the inn. Mrs. Hall lit the fire and left him there while she went to prepare him a meal with her own hands. A desk to stop at Iping, maybe, in the winter time was an unheard of piece of luck, let alone a guest who was no haggler, and she was resolved to show herself worthy of her good fortune. As soon as the bacon was well under way and Milly, her lymphatic maid, had been brisked up a bit by a few deftly chosen expressions of contempt, she carried the cloth plates, commas are important. She carried the cloth, plates, and glasses into the parlor and began to lay them with the utmost éclat, maybe? I don't know how to say that. Although the fire was burning up briskly, she was surprised to see that her visitor still wore his hat and coat, standing with his back to her and staring out of the window at the falling snow in the yard. His gloved hands were clasped behind him, and he seemed to be lost in thought. She noticed that the melting snow that still sprinkled his shoulders dripped upon her carpet. "Can I take your hat and coat, sir?" she said, "and give them a good dry in the kitchen?" "No," he said without turning. She was not sure she had heard him, and was about to repeat her question. He turned his head and looked at her over his shoulder. "I prefer to keep them on," he said with emphasis. She noticed that he wore big blue spectacles with sidelights, and had a bush side whisker over his coat collar that completely hid his cheeks and face. "Very well, sir," she said. "As you like. In a bit the room will be warmer." He made no answer, and had turned his face away from her again, and Mrs. Hall, feeling that her conversational advances were ill-timed, laid the rest of the table things in a quick staccato and whisked out of the room. When she returned, he was still standing there like a man of stone, his back hunched, his collar turned up, his dripping hat brim turned down, hiding his face and ears completely. She put down the eggs and bacon with considerable emphasis and called rather than said to him, "Your lunch is served, sir." "Thank you," he said at the same time, and did not stir until she was closing the door. Then he swung round and approached the table with a certain eager quickness. As she went behind the bar to the kitchen, she heard a sound repeated at regular intervals. Chirk, chirk, chirk it went, the sound of a spoon being rapidly whisked round a basin. "That girl," he said. "There. I clean forgot it. It's her being so long," and while she herself finished mixing the mustard, she gave Willie a few verbal stabs for her excessive slowness. She had cooked the ham and eggs, laid the table, and done everything, while Milly, help indeed, had only succeeded in delaying the mustard. And him a new guest, and wanting to stay. Then she filled the mustard pot, and putting it with a certain stateliness upon a gold and black tea tray, carried it into the parlor. She rapped and entered promptly. As she did so, her visitor moved quickly, so that she got but a glimpse of a white object disappearing behind the table. It would seem he was picking something from the floor. She rapped down the mustard pot on the table, and then she noticed the overcoat and hat being taken off and put over a chair in front of the fire, and a pair of wet boots threatened rust to her steel fender. She went to these things resolutely. "I suppose I may have them to dry now," she said, in a voice that brooked no denial. "Leave the hat," said her visitor in a muffled voice, and turning, she saw he had raised his head and was sitting and looking at her. For a moment she stood gaping at him, too surprised to speak. He held a white cloth. It was a serviette that he had brought with him over the lower part of his face, so that his mouth and jaws were completely hidden. And that was the reason of his muffled voice. But it was not that which startled Mrs. Hall. It was the fact that... hey, Nikki, how's it going? It was the fact that all his forehead above his blue glasses was covered by a white bandage, and that another covered his ears, leaving not a scrap of his face exposed, excepting only his pink peaked nose. It was bright, pink, and shiny, just as it had been at first. He wore a dark brown velvet jacket with a high black linen-lined collar turned up about his neck. The thick black hair, escaping as it could below and between the cross bandages, projected in curious tails and horns, giving him the strangest appearance conceivable. This muffled and bandaged head was so unlike what she had anticipated that for a moment she was rigid. Doing all right, just playing my zombie demon in. Well, that's cool. Yeah, I was saying earlier, I gotta get, I'm only gonna do the gaming thing over on I'm gonna revive the 1010 account just to kind of separate content a little clearer, but I'm kind of looking forward to it. Even if I end up just playing some kind of light little games, I've got some of those I mentioned before, like little Japanese jump scare games, and I don't know, something kind of mindless, you know what I mean? Because while all this stuff, all the literature and fiction and writing stuff has been going really well, actually, I've been having a blast with it, it's also really, really tiring. So I need to take a few days during the week and just kind of like let my brain exhale, so to speak. So yeah, you know what? Taking out some zombies might not be such a bad idea. So, all right. Yeah, I do not recognize this one. So I'm going to make a prediction that this is probably from the early 20th century, or someone's at least emulating it. It has that sort of feel of somewhat more classical literature. It's not totally antiquated. But anyway, let's see. Okay, well, yeah, nailed the time period. Awesome. The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. So, readable, obviously. Not anything I'm going to add to my list. I really don't care to... I read War of the Worlds growing up and loved it as a kid. Just not my thing anymore. So... okay. My bad. It's not a totally mindless killing zombie game. Well, then I don't want to play. No. Mindless killing zombie game. It's a bit more tactical than most zombie games. Yeah, you know, when I think about it, I remember you saying that it's like... here's the problem, right? We were talking about this before, where it's like when you look at the trailers and stuff that they have available online, it's like, oh, look, mindless killing over and over and over again, where they don't show any of the other aspects, any of the economy, or the any of the other stuff in between. So yeah, it's like all I've seen in the game is look, zombies, kill them. But no, I'm glad you're doing something you enjoy. That's cool. Oh, big stretch. Which game be this? When you say it that way, I have to read it in my sort of like pirate, which I can't do very well, but I don't know. But I read that, and in my head, that's a pirate saying it. Which game be this, yar? I'm tired. I'm going to make weird jokes. It's just the way it's going to go. All right. Dead Frontier. It's a web browser game. Cool. But right now, I'm trying to get down to Death Row before you go to bed. Okay. Yeah, that's the other thing. I don't seem to be able to start these streams until pretty late in the evening, and that means that I miss a lot of the folks I'd like to hang out with. Death Row seems a scary place because of all the, well, waiting for it. Well, the death, obviously, yeah. Also, when you say zombie game, the other zombie game I've seen recently is information on the I didn't know they were still making that, Dead Island 2. Which looks like a super gory door fest extraordinaire. See, it is scary. Zombies are stronger, faster, take more hits, and can't outrun hordes like in the other areas. Oh. All right. Well, while we talk about zombie games, I'm going to jump to the next thing and see what we get here. Not very long. And again, it's all to feed the brain, kind of shake loose all the preconceptions about what prose is supposed to look like, so that hopefully I'll get some good writing done tonight. So here we go, one or two more. Then I have an idea of one to read. I don't know, there are a couple different things I could read. I'll pick one of them. At supper that night, as many times before, his father said, "Well, suppose we go to the picture show." "Oh, Jay," his mother said, "that horrid little man." "What's wrong with him?" his father asked. Not because he didn't know what she would say, but so she would say it. "He's so nasty," she said, and she always did. "So vulgar. This nasty little cane, hooking up skirts and things, and that nasty little walk." His father laughed, as he always did, and Rufus felt that it had become rather an empty joke. But as always, the laughter also cheered him. He felt that the laughter enclosed him with his father. They walked downtown in the light of mother of pearl to the Majestic and found their way to seats by the light of the screen. In the exhilarating smell of stale tobacco ranked sweat, perfume, and dirty drawers, while the piano played fast music and galloping horses raised a grandiose flag of dust, and there was William S. Hart, with both guns blazing and his long horse face and his long hard lip, and the great country rode away behind him as wide as the world. Then he made a bashful face at a girl, and his horse raised its upper lip, and everybody laughed, and the screen was filled with the city, and with the sidewalk of a side street of a city, a long line of palms. And there was Charlie. Everyone laughed the minute they saw him, squattily walking with his toes out and his knees wide apart, as if he were chafed. Rufus's father laughed, and Rufus laughed too. This time, Charlie stole a whole bag of eggs, and when a cop came along, he hid them in the seat of his pants. Then he caught sight of a pretty woman, and he began to squat and twirl his cane and make silly faces. She tossed her head and walked away with her chin up high, and her dark mouth as small as she could make it, and he followed her very busily, doing all sorts of things with his cane that made everybody laugh, but she paid no attention. Finally, she stopped at a corner to wait for a streetcar, turning her back to him and pretending he wasn't even there. And after trying to get her attention for a while and not succeeding, he looked out at the audience, shrugged his shoulders, and acted as if she wasn't there. But after tapping his foot for a little, pretending he didn't care, he became interested again, and with a charming smile tipped his derby, but she only stiffened and tossed her head again, and everybody laughed. Then he walked back and forth behind her, looking at her and squatting a little, while he walked very quietly, and everybody laughed again. Then he flicked hold of the straight end of his cane, and with the crooked end hooked up her skirt to the knee, in exactly the way that disgusted Mama. Looking very eagerly at her legs, and everybody laughed loudly, but she pretended she had not noticed. Then he twirled his cane and suddenly squatted, bending the cane and hitching up his pants, and again hooked up her skirt so that you could see the panties she wore, ruffled almost like the edges of curtains, and everybody whooped with laughter. She suddenly turned in a rage and gave him a shove in the chest, and he sat down, straight-legged, hard enough to hurt, and everybody whooped again, and she walked haughtily away up the street, forgetting about the streetcar, mad as a hornet, as his father exclaimed in delight, And there was Charlie, flat on his bottom on the sidewalk. And the way he looked, kind of sickly and disgusted, you could see that he suddenly remembered those eggs. And suddenly you remembered them too. The way his face looked, with the lip wrinkled off the teeth and the sickly little smile, it made you feel just the way those broken eggs must feel against your seat. As queer and awful as that time in the white piqué suit, when it ran down out of the pant legs and showed all over your stockings, and you had to walk home that way with people looking. And Rufus's father nearly tore his hat off laughing, and so did everybody else. And Rufus was sorry for Charlie, having been so recently in a similar predicament, but the contagion of laughter was too much for him, and he laughed too. Let's see. If I heard of Overly's Heartastic Productions. No, I have not, but that sounds fun.
Yes, you have.
Have I?
Yeah, I watch them all the time. Or most of them, they do mythology and history stuff.
Oh, is that them?
Not extra credits.
Oh, different.
Yeah.
Huh.
It's a team of two people named Franzen who they just name themselves that.
Okay. My son informs me that yes, I do know them. But apparently
I have
I'm old and I've forgotten.
I've informed you previously.
I see. Okay. So yes, apparently I've heard of them. Let's see. She's a lady. What does the myth and trope videos? Oh, okay. Here, I'm going to go take a look. Kind of off camera here for a minute. Because I want to see. And I want to tee up my memory here. Do not play a trailer. Do not make noise. There we go. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. It looks a little familiar here. I think it's been a long time since I've watched any of their stuff. But yes, Yep. I watched this. Yeah. Actually, thanks for the reminder. I probably go back and watch some of the stuff that they've released since the last time I watched. Cool. Awesome. All right. So we have a family going to see an old and kind of, let's just say, problematically funny Western of some kind. And we're looking at A Death in the Family by James. I've heard of this, actually. But there's just that barest, plain level of recognition. Like, I can tell you, obviously, what it's about. It's an autobiographical novel by author James. How do you say that name? Agee? Novelist, journalist, poet, screenwriter, and film critic in the 40s, writing for Time magazine. He's one of the most influential film critics. Okay. Set in Knoxville, Tennessee, began writing it in 1948, but it was not quite complete when he died in 1955. With repeatedly many portions having been written in the home of his friend Francis Wicks. It was edited and released posthumously in 1957 by editor David McDowell. His widow and children were left with little money after Agee's death, and McDowell wanted to help them by publishing his work. He won the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 1958. Interesting. It's based on the events that occurred to the author in 1915 when his father went out of town to see his own father, who had suffered a heart attack. During the return trip, his father was killed in a car accident. The novel provides a portrait of life in Knoxville, Tennessee, showing how such a loss affects the young widow, her two children, her atheist father, and the dead man's alcoholic brother. Okay. Alrighty. Not really... I'm not a huge Uggy. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that is an unusual word for my brain. It does not know how to pronounce it. And yeah, it's maybe I don't know. I don't know if it's the period or the style, the enormously long paragraph. Not quite my thing. So glad to have seen it. Moving on. Let's see what time it is. It's a little bit after 10 here local time. How about one more, like I'll pick a literary sample. And then I'll take a little break and then we'll get to writing. Not yet. Hold on. Go to my Kindle library, and I've got two things in mind. Which one to do? So I think I'm going to read from one called The Overstory. Not because I think it's awesome. Like, I do like the bits of it I've read. But because it is a book that is regarded as widely praised by critics. But also maybe just a little challenging. I might cheat and read two things, honestly. We'll see. All right, let's go ahead and put that on the screen. There we go. First, there was nothing. Then there was everything. Then, in a park above a western city after dusk, the air is raining messages. A woman sits on the ground, leaning against a pine. Its bark presses hard against her back, as hard as life. Its needles scent the air in a force hums in the heart of the wood. Her ears tuned down to the lowest frequencies. The tree is saying things, and words before words. It says, sun and water are questions endlessly worth answering. It says a good answer must be reinvented many times from scratch. It says every piece of earth needs a new way to grip it. There are more ways to branch than any cedar pencil will ever find. A thing can travel everywhere just by holding still. The woman does exactly that. Signals rain down around her like seeds. Talk runs far afield tonight. The bands and the alders speak of long ago disasters. Spikes of pale pardon me trying to read that word. Chinquapin flowers shake down their pollen. Soon they will turn into spiny fruits. Poplars repeat the wind's gossip. Persimmons and walnuts set out their bribes, and rowans their blood-red clusters. Ancient oaks wave prophecies of future weather. The several hundred kinds of hawthorn laugh at the single name they're forced to share. Laurels insist that even death is nothing to lose sleep over. Something in the air scent commands the woman. Close your eyes and think of willow. The weeping you see will be wrong. Picture an acacia thorn. Nothing in your thought will be sharp enough. What hovers right above you? What floats over your head right now? Now. Trees even farther away join in. All the ways you imagine us, bewitched mangroves up on stilts. A nutmeg's inverted spade, gnarled Baja elephant trunks, the straight-up missile of a sow, are always amputations. Your kind never sees this whole. You miss the half of it and more. There's always as much below ground as above. That's the trouble with people, their root problem. Life runs alongside them unseen, right here, right next. Creating the soil, cycling water, trading in nutrients, making weather, building atmosphere, feeding and curing and sheltering more kinds of creatures than people know how to count. A chorus of living wood sings to the woman. If your mind were only a slightly greener thing, we'd drown you in meaning. The pine she leans against says, listen, there's something you need to hear. And that's the beginning. That is chapter 1. It goes on there to a story that kind of it's a story of a family in early America, and no surprise, trees factor big into the story. And the rest of the book is like that. It is kind of telling not really a history. Anyway, it's an interesting read. It is on my list, but it's fairly low down on my list. Partially because while I can, on the one hand, see that, like, yeah, the prose is well constructed, there's a certain sort of angle or attitude in it that kind of rubs me the wrong way. And I think it's good to read things occasionally that are of high quality in terms of their construction, but maybe aren't the sort of thing that you just love, you know? So if you find something that has one aspect of it that you can latch onto and kind of carry you through the work, but it's going to challenge you in other ways, well, all the better. You'll probably, you know, even if you still decide at the end that it isn't something that you love, or even like, then you'll at least know better why, and it'll still inform what you do in your own craft. The thing that stood out the first time I read this, that first there was nothing, then there was everything. Okay. Then in a park above a western city after dusk, the air is raining messages. Personally, I love that image. I don't need to know any more details about what it is. Like, it's an abstract idea and my brain can keep it at that abstract level, and it's eager to kind of start filling in details and start to pin it down. A woman sits on the ground, leaning against a pine. Its bark presses hard against her back. And then this, as hard as life. I don't know about you, but that strikes me as maybe one of the most, like, stereotypically literary sentences I've read in a long time. Like, I don't know, it's just, you need to kind of, like, be wearing a lot of black and maybe a beret, and when you write or read that line, it's kind of like, as hard as life, you know? It's like, ooh, okay. I was doing okay up until that. Now I feel like, I don't know, it just stood out to me as maybe a little bit blunt. No, don't select anything and don't stay there. Good, Kindle. Okay. I hate it in apps when you have nowhere to click to unselect a thing. You just, no matter where you click, you just pick something else. But the rest of it I really like. That one little bit is like, ugh, makes my eyes want to roll just a little bit. But the rest of it, it's needles scent the air and force hums in the heart of the wood. It's a good rhythm, the language, the image that it's progressively constructing. Her ears tuned down to the lowest frequencies. The trees saying things in words before words. This again gets a little hoity-toity to me. It says, sun and water are questions endlessly worth answering. It says, a good answer must be reinvented many times. It says, every piece of earth needs a new way to grip it. So it's a literary version of, this is not a pipe. Yeah, could be. So... But I listened to an interview recently with the author of this, and it was really interesting to listen to. It was interesting to hear about his method and kind of how he approaches things. What was funny is that you read this, and again, it can maybe, like, even to my ears, sounds a little pretentious in places, which, you know, okay. But yeah, he didn't come off that way at all in the interview. It's like, you know, this is not a pipe, is a painting of a pipe with that caption on it. Yeah, that is Magritte, I believe. It's meant to say, this is a drawing, not a natural pipe. Yep. Just gonna pull up the painting here. How do you spell the name? I don't know French. So something along those lines. Ah, well, there's the correct. Okay. Sydney Pound. The treachery of images. Let's just get the picture. There we go. There's my new logo. We'll just say I don't have any better way to do this. Whoops. Where'd it go? There we go. Except you can't see it on the stream, so never mind. Anyway. Okay. Break time. I'm going to go and just kind of stretch a little bit. And then it's time to write. And I'm at the point where I need to get to what I consider to be a viable draft, section by section by section of the thing I'm working on, which means there's going to be an awful lot of self-loathing and regret in the next hour or two, depending on how many sprints I do. There's going to be a lot of gnashing of teeth and questions, wondering, will I ever actually finish this thing? Normal night of writing. And blip, there goes that. We can get the writing stuff going here. Anyone else use Git for managing their writing? Just curious. If I can show that here. Yeah, there we go. So I actually, so we gotta do, let's get logged in. And then, all my writing, I actually have something I didn't check in last time, so I can add it, and then, no idea what I wrote here. I should save it. My work in progress. And there you go. Now it's available on my phone, where I have a little similar bash shell running. Can't remember the name of the app for that, but it's a pretty cool little thing. It's fun being able to actually run Git commands on my Android, like any other terminal. I've got a crusty old laptop out in the garage that's running a stripped down version of Linux for when it's cool enough and I can go out there and be alone when I write. This is how I do cloud syncing, which I actually used. You're at to throw. All right, well, good luck. Don't die. But anyway, yeah, so I used to use Doodle, what was it? I can't even remember what they called it, like Doodle Cloud or whatever. I don't know if that was actually the name of it or what. But they had a couple different apps that they used for syncing things, and both of them were pretty lame. They were absolutely unreliable. This will be fun. And by that, I mean F this place. Make that beer for the moment. Yeah, like I can basically say the same thing about my writing. This will be fun, by which I mean. All right, not going to close that, but let's switch over the window. There we go. And we'll turn on a couple other things here. We don't need the timer yet. We'll get the summary, the camera to block the... I found I don't mind sharing some of the text on the screen for these streams, but I don't like there are some nights where it feels better to kind of write behind the curtain so to speak. So that's where I stay behind this area. Get a little light going there. And I think this is going to be one of those nights. Like I said, all set up here now. I'm going to take an intermission, and I will be back in just a little bit. See you then. And welcome back. I will, while I'm writing, probably I'm going to turn off the mic tonight, because I have some corn chips next to me. No one needs to hear that. Let's see. Also, I think I'm actually going to pause the music for a bit. I just reading my own mood. I'm probably going to do better just with some good old-fashioned white noise. So I'm going to find some rain sounds and play that instead. There we go. Man, that is a little detail on that site. When you hit pause and it does the fade on the music. That is really nice. I would love to be able to configure that. Crunch, crunch. Let's see. There's an idea. Let me try that. Basically, I'm looking. It goes. You're still able to reach, to reach over to the chat and tell us how you're doing. So at least you're not so overwhelmed that you can't even type messages on the side there. But anyway, yeah. So I was looking for some rain sounds, but I don't want so many ads on YouTube now. Like way, way more than there used to be. Kind of hate it. Sorry, I just got a rather interesting looking email to check out later. Nothing for on stream. Nothing terrible either, actually. You got a horde while you were in an apartment building on the top floor. You had the perfect vantage point to just use your grenade launcher from a safe corner. Nice. My favorite modes of attack. Oh, Amazon, why do you do this? All the times I sign in with no problem. Now I'm on the stream and you're like, nope, you have to sign in now. Really? Gotta keep that out of the way of the camera. Here are all my codes. No. Oh, come on, where is it? Okay, now I gotta go back and look. I have not worked the camera on for a long time. I'm going to tell you, it's taking a little doing to remember that I should not do things like, show my phone when there are codes to sign in. In fact, yeah, I just thought of something else. Anyway, gotta learn to be careful. Okay. Let's see what we got here. You haven't found anything exciting in your treasure hunt, sadly. Well, that's too bad. Was that kind of the main point of going down into Death Row? You may have said that earlier and I forgot. All right, we'll see if we can layer things here. It's fairly loud. Turn that one down just a bit. Don't want thunder, just rain. That's not relaxing. All right, that's it. I'll get my keyboard back on the screen here. Along with the countdown timer, and I'm going to turn off the mic so that I can make crunchy noises without worrying about annoying people. We'll get 20 minutes of writing going. Talk to you in 20. All right. Never mind those rain tracks. I don't know who the genius was. Sorry to sound so harsh, but I don't know who decided that it would be good to limit those tracks to basically a couple minutes with fades in between each one. They're like 10 hours of rain noise. I'm like, oh, brilliant. Yeah, 10 hours of rain noise, 2 minutes at a time with a gap in between, like every 2 minutes. Like, oh man, no. No. You found a katana, a sniper rifle, and a nodachi. Nothing rare, though. Okay. That'll do. That track is 10 hours long. And just in case I freak out and have a bizarro 10-hour, 11-hour writing spree, yeah, I set it on loop, so we're good to go. All right. Mic's going off. Back to writing. Hey, welcome back. No sooner had I said that than a horde showed up. Yeah, isn't that the way it usually goes? Oh, man. Excuse me. Well, I will actually be right back. I've got to take another brief intermission instead of just putting up the intermission sign, though, because I think that's kind of not a lot going on there. It hides the chat and all that. I'll put up something else. Just a moment. Still haven't found anything useful, but your bag's full. So are those things that you can sell? At least get some monies out of it. So I'm going to go hole up in a safe place. Sounds good. Me too. Whoops. I did not mean to do that. Again. Yeah, you can sell the stuff. That's cool. Get some reward for all your effort. Okay, back in a few minutes here. Okay, rather than jumping straight back into the next sprint, I'm going to take a minute and just take a breather. Got the next 4 days off. In that time, I've got to, I'm going to be dusting off 10 ton. I have plans for 10 ton, just not because I think I need to. Like, there's a bunch of stuff I never did with that whole thing that I think would be fun. I want to get a better model and actually do the face tracking thing. So I'm setting aside my pennies for a used iPhone because they have much, much, much better face tracking. And I don't have facial expressions, so getting the good tracking system is kind of important. And then Tuesday, probably most of the day, the save place wasn't safe. Oh no. Oh, crud. So you hold up in the much, much, much more dangerous place. Oh. Sounds like you're having a night. Turn that down a little bit there. But anyway, I'm looking forward to it. There's a game releasing on Tuesday that I keep talking about that I've been waiting for forever. And I keep hearing about new features. One of the things I love about that people today I don't think can appreciate as much. Maybe they can. I don't know. The people who make the stuff we love are so much more accessible to their fans these days. Not all of them, of course, but I've said before, I've had some conversations with some filmmakers that have made some of my favorite movies. Just brief little Twitter things, nothing big, but even that, it was just awesome. Well, the guy who started the company that's making this game is very down to earth and kind of hangs out with fans online and chats and provides info and takes feedback, and he's awesome. Dylan Cuthbert, not just him, the whole company actually. They seem like a really good group, and they've made something really, really cool. A lot of cool things actually. If you know any of the Pixel Junk games, which I always kind of interpreted as really cool little video game connoisseur boutique kind of games, right? There's Eden. They had one for a while called 4 a.m., which was really interesting. That just unfortunately didn't take off, but really interesting idea about music production. Let's see. Pixel Junk Shooter, Pixel Junk Monsters, and Monsters 2. I feel like I'm forgetting one. But Eden was one of the ones I really remember, just because the music was really cool, and the way the music was sort of interactive and played along with what was going on the screen. Anyway, it was awesome. They've made a lot of really cool stuff. He has now, since they, of course, since the game's releasing next Tuesday, they, have submitted their sort of gold master to Sony to put on the store. And so they're much in a spot where they're much more able to just talk about the game openly now. They know now, like, all the things, there's a difference between the things that they wanted to do and how many of them would actually make it into the final product. And so they didn't want to talk about things that they might have to reserve for future releases, because then it seemed, people get funny about it. It seems misleading. So they've been being very careful. Well, now they can open up. Now they know exactly what's in the game, and so they've been talking a lot about new features. And there's a lot of new stuff in there that I'm really looking forward to. It's going to be, in some ways, a different sort of game because of some of the changes they've made, but I don't have any worries about it. I don't think it's going to be different in a bad way. It looks like it's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to getting together with folks in that community and just kind of hanging out in the void for a day. And I'll be streaming as much as I can. So this weekend, I gotta get 10 tons set up. I gotta get OBS set up with multiple profiles so I can switch back and forth between Ken Can't Write and 10 Ton Noggin. There's stuff to do. I want to start making some more meme videos for 10 ton, so that there was a thing I was doing on there that I really liked. I don't know. I've described the idea to other people, and I feel like maybe I'm just underselling it. But I wrote a little program that that uses Microsoft Azure to do speech to text interpretation. And it uses that interpretation then to match it to a series of patterns that I've defined. Like I configure a little application and a little teeny like self-contained website on my computer that runs while I'm streaming, so that as I say key phrases, just as I'm chatting online, it will queue up videos and then play them in a little TV on screen. I thought it was fun. I thought it was pretty clever, and I was looking forward to adding a lot of stuff to it. But again, every I just don't feel like it went over that well. But I'm going to do it anyway because I think it's fun. So I gotta get some more content made for that too. There have been a lot of things like that lately. I'm just going to be honest. A couple projects I've worked on that apparently have done, you know how I don't know. So growing up, nerd was a bad thing. It got your butt kicked regularly if you were a nerd. I was the rare giant nerd, so I didn't have to deal with that as much, but I still got, still got picked on a lot. These days, there's this idea that nerds and geekdom, that, oh, it's such a cool thing. And it's like, unless you nerd out too much. And unfortunately, I'm in that spot where I nerd out too much on things. And one of the things I've been nerding out on is I got a bit of equipment from off of eBay that was like leftover equipment from an old TV station that they can't use anymore. I think you can find them pretty regularly. It's called a channel modulator. And I searched for little bits of hardware to go from my HDMI, a spare HDMI port on my, or rather display port on my PC. So to set up a separate little screen that I could then run to a coaxial cable to the channel modulator, so I could basically use my PC to broadcast my own TV station from inside my home. Now, it's not high power. It doesn't go very far. Like, I set up a TV on the right side of me, and I had all the other equipment set up on the left with a broadcast antenna, and it barely reached the TV. So I'm not worried about upsetting the FCC or disturbing my neighbor's, TV watching or anything. Not that anyone actually does that anymore. Everything's digital now. But again, to me, that project is self-explanatory. It has an innate intrinsic coolness to it that when I took an image off of my PC and broadcast my own TV signal onto a set that was right there next to me, I'm like, success. This is awesome. I'm just going to leave that running here. Like, it's just a cool looking little thing. Without fail, everyone, maybe even tonight, without fail, everyone who I've told about, where I've told them about that project, they're like, why are you doing that? I'm like, what do you mean, why am I doing that? It's cool. It's awesome. And then I think they go back to their, 8K, 85-inch, wafer thin, pure gallium OLED television that isn't even hanging on the wall anymore. They just have a fan under it, and it's just sitting there suspended in midair. They go back to watching the new Game of Thrones series, and basically, I think people who grew up with TV that was all staticky and miscolored and all that, it's like, why would you want to go back to that? I'm like, because of memories, because of sentimentality. Like, it's just a cool thing. Anyway, enough on that. Why don't we go ahead and do another writing sprint, and then we'll do another. Get things set up here again. That's good. And talk to you in 20. Happy writing. one more sprint done, and I'm actually happy to say I got a halfway decent paragraph out of that. New material, which doesn't happen very often these days, so that's nice. Here's the problem. I don't know that it's actually doing what I set out to do, but I kind of like it. So basically, I've got a relatively simple idea I'm trying to convey, and that is the main character, Gabe, realizing that he sees the memory of an important day in his life two slightly different ways. Like when he's kind of distracted and seeing it in passing, he kind of wonders why he gave it a name, because it doesn't seem especially remarkable. It's a day, other than being the day that he and his mom arrived in California, but he actually just spent a lot of the day sleeping. But when he really thinks about it, you know, he realizes that there's a whole lot more going on that he's kind of pushed to the back that he just doesn't think about much. So again, it's not just a matter of getting those facts onto the page, it's putting them there in a way that is, like I was describing, ideally in the writing. That was the books I was reading earlier, where it's sort of multi-dimensional, where it's doing work along a couple different axes, and the bare facts of it are plain and readable and sound nice on the page, but that it's also doing additional work emotionally and other ways. So yes, tall order, but that's what I like trying to do. And when it works, when I'm actually able to pull it off, it's very, very rewarding. So I'm kind of I'm looking for these. It's good very often, I found, when working on something that's that abstract, to not try to focus on the abstract part of it, to not try to think about feelings and write words that conjure feelings. No, you think about you do the opposite. You think of something very concrete. And so I've mentioned before that the character who may end up being the sort of the title character, her name is Saturday, who he ends up, we see in the very first chapter of the book, which is what I'm working on. He ends up marrying her. We know that she, by the end of the chapter, that she passes away, that he outlives her by quite a while. So I'm considering using a sort of a passing description of him sitting down by the bay in the town where they lived, and he's had a hard time. Basically, it's a guy sitting on a bench looking out over the bay and eating a sandwich and kind of reflecting on this. But even with that, there's enough in that concrete image to start to build, hopefully start to build some more emotional content. So it's funny what you can get. It's actually very often you can get much better emotional depth just by focusing on simple, concrete things that people can have experienced themselves and can relate to. But that is going to be the last sprint for the night. As much as I'd like to keep going, as much as I feel like I need to keep going, I'm also not, I'm going to do myself harm if I keep going, if I keep pushing through. So, as usual, I've got to go grab dinner. I still have to do my Duolingo for the night. And I want to sleep. So, thanks, Nikki. Hey, I hope you find some good stuff. I hope you make it out of there alive. Thanks to Bobitus, as usual, for stopping by and saying hi. Hope your writing is going well. And let me see something here. Let's pull this back here. I'll show that on the screen. Yeah, so Mead's Homebrew, Cutesy Cat, YS Books, and there were some others. Oh, you died. Oh, no. Oh, Coffee Twills, and I don't know how to say the other ones. AIIJX. I could not tell you how to pronounce that. Those are all the people who have recently followed on Twitch. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I've enjoyed Coffee Twills. I've seen you stream a couple times. It's been fun going to watch. Look forward to taking some time to in between my own streams to just kind of hang out and ride along with your sprints and chat a little bit. So you died, but you did find a new thing to strive towards. Oh, what's that? What did you find? I'm going to look up a word. I'm reading here. Yeah, that works. Let's see. Apparently, there are 2 third-tier implants that you could craft that reduce damage taken. Oh, okay. Cool. Together, they give 10% damage reduction, 5% damage stealth, and 5% speed. Yeah, that's good buffs. Very cool. Tell you what, I'm actually going to read the paragraph and some of the other first drafty loose stuff that I worked on tonight, just because. So again, this is no, I'll just read it. Read the start of the book and then get here. And it's gonna. This is literally first draft. This is going to be really messy, but that's okay. They say we get double XP when it rains. Let's see. Gabe would come to remember that day. It's the last Friday before Saturday. He took a kind of guilty pleasure in concocting the phrase. It wasn't especially clever or charming, not nearly as much as he wanted it to be. But he enjoyed it all the same. There was something in its strange symmetry that pleased and confounded him. He brought it to mind over and over again, like a puzzle he could never quite solve. In time, the words tied themselves into an impossible knot, inextricably bound at the day of their christening, their namesake, Friday, October 3rd, 1980. Let's see, I have a couple different versions here. Let's go with his memory. Nope, not that one. Let's see. Yeah, in the decades to follow, he often observed his own inclinations toward that day, the polar orientation in his memory, the Cartesian origin against which he subconsciously positioned and measured everything that followed. Memory of the day he'd named was a layered thing. He could see it any one of several ways, at several depths. Setting in the days after Saturday by the bay, on a bench sun-bleached and salted by mist, the maritime harvest of each day's cooling. Gay would eat a cold sandwich he'd packed, wipe his hands on his pant leg, squinting out over the gray-green water. He sat very still, tense. These benches were inclined to give splinters. You had to be aware of the grain before you sat, check the way it ran, and approach it only at orthogonal angles, or else risk a long wooden needle in your thigh. Each observance, and this is where it gets super rough, but that's okay. Each observance governed by the passing moment's tone and timbre. He saw it either as waters churned by the moment's rush and circumstance, showing only fractured light, surfaces in motion, or else left calm, left clear to show the depths and shape of past moments wrought in murk and shadow. Light can only travel so far down. There we go. There's Les Sprint's work. So, hope you enjoyed it. I'm fairly happy with it. It's a little probably overwrought. I can see a couple things in there already that I'll want to change, but hey, it's a good start. It's good to get some new material on the page. So, Al Hassan, I'm sorry to say this. I'm happy to see you here. Thank you for stopping by, but I'm going to wrap it up for tonight. I am just too exhausted. So, I do hope to catch you again. I'll tell you what I'm actually hoping is that I can get a regular schedule so that people can actually look either at Twitch or at a trailer on YouTube and see when I'm going to stream, so that there's a little bit of regularity set up to this so that we can maybe, hop online at the same time a little more often. But thank you very much to everyone who stopped by. Appreciate your support. Have a great night. Have a great start to your Friday, and I will see you again soon. Tomorrow night, as always, we're doing Folklore Friday. I'll be reading some Irish folk tales. Wise Books gave me some folklore to read, so I will actually. I haven't talked to them about reading that online, so I'm not necessarily going to do that. But I will, depending on how things go. Yeah, that might be an option if I can get a hold of them and work it out. We'll see. Don't know. Play it by ear. Take care. God bless. I will see you again tomorrow. Night.